evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's debate. My name is Teddy and I'm the chairman, and Ciara is the timekeeper. This debate will be judged by a panel of 3 adjudicators who are Miss Zaf, Miss Boyd-Turner, and Miss France. The topic of this debate is that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against traditional schooling. The affirmative team seated to my right is from St. Michael's College. The negative team seated to my left is Pembroke School. The speaking time for this debate is 4 minutes with a double bell at the end of your speaking time. A warning bell will ring once at 3 minutes. The continuous bell will ring 30 seconds after the final bell. Quite yet.
We have spares just for this again. We got your face.
With the 20.
It's not worth it, potentially. There we go. Alright. Please switch off your mobile phones and other electronic devices. I declare this debate open. I call upon the first affirmative speaker, Isaac Zonta.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of tonight's debate is that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against traditional education. We define the topic as homeschooling, to educate one's child at home instead of sending them to school. Quiet rebellion refers to intentional small acts of resistance that challenge societal norms in subtle ways. Against, not in conformity with, Merriam-Webster states. Traditional education, a structured form of education that has been established and practiced for centuries, typically occurring in a classroom setting where students are taught by someone with higher knowledge or experience. Overall, we define the topic as educating one's child at home instead of at school is a resistance to authority, not in an outspoken manner or in conformity with beliefs and methods of teachings that have existed for a long time. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe that this statement is true. Today, as first speaker, I will be talking to you about cultural autonomy and silent resistance. Our second speaker will be talking about resisting institutional authority and challenging the educational system. And our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team case. Today, I'm going to discuss 2 points. My first point is, traditional schools frequently enforce uniform standards which reflect current cultural perspectives. In South Australia, homeschooling provides families the freedom to take control of the content and alter education to fit their personal beliefs and identities. According to Home Education Association, families must submit a plan according to the Australian curriculum, but they remain free to choose the pace, approach, and content. This allows families to express their own culture, values, or beliefs. AdelaideNow.com published that the number of South Australians who homeschool has increased since COVID, with over 2,500 students enrolled, nearly double the number prior to the pandemic. By preserving their identities, maintaining customs, and developing an education that reflects their children instead of the government's suggested curriculum, parents are subtly rebelling against tradition. Now to my second point. Silent resistance is also expressed through homeschooling. Typically, rebellion is thought of as actions or protests. However, homeschooling demonstrates that resistance can be non-violent. In South Australia, homeschool families must consent to home visits, submit an annual learning plan, and apply for an exemption from school attendance. Each family's decision to withdraw from mainstream education is made apparent by this formal process, as the Home Education Association points out. The act of non-compliance is subtle but intentional. Over the past 5 years, homeschooling has more than doubled across Australia. theconversation.com.au reported a nationwide increase in homeschooling of 111% from 2018 to 2023. The unspoken message given by each of those families is that we are not convinced that education takes place solely in a classroom. By withdrawing, this is a rebellion. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, homeschooling is a quiet rebellion. It provides cultural autonomy and it is silent resistance, wearing away at the system not with protest, but with persistence. Homeschooling is more than learning at home. It is a dignified, enduring, and transformative rebellion. Thank you very much.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Salma Avalki.
Good evening, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against traditional education. We agree with the definition given by the affirmative team. However, we, the negative team, strongly believe that this statement is false. The first speaker has tried to tell you that homeschooling spreads new ideas and inspires societal change. This is wrong because homeschooling is chosen for personal reasons, such as accommodating health needs or family preferences, according to the National Home Education Research Institute. Homeschooling does not aim to campaign for policy changes or challenge public education. Instead, it provides an alternative learning environment that prioritizes the child's well-being, making it practical and personal rather than rebellious. They have also tried to tell you that it undermines the collective experience of education and breaks down culture. This is wrong because homeschooling doesn't reject culture. It simply redefines it. The collective experience of education isn't limited to the classrooms and hallways. In fact, many homeschool students participate in social clubs, sporting teams, music lessons, religious youth groups, volunteer programs, and homeschool cooperatives. Furthermore, the assumption that attending the same institution guarantees meaningful social bonds is false. Many students feel isolated at school due to bullying, exclusion, or academic pressure. Today I'll be speaking to you about 2 points. My first point is that homeschoolers use the same system. As a first speaker, I'll be speaking to you about how homeschooling is not a quiet rebellion against traditional education because homeschoolers use the same system and it does not spread a message or inspire societal change. Our second speaker will speak to you about how many homeschool children have health issues or personal preferences that need to be understood and that it has been existed before traditional education was created. Our third speaker will rebut some of our team case. Today I'll be speaking to you about 2 points. My first point is that homeschoolers use the same system and do the same tests. Homeschooling families do not reject this or secretly oppose the traditional system. In fact, they operate within it. According to My Homeschool, parents who choose to homeschool their children must register with their local education authority and submit detailed learning plans which are aligned with the state or national curriculum. This means that homeschoolers still cover the same core subjects and meet similar education standards as traditional schools. Furthermore, families often prepare their children for the same external assessments as school students, such as NAPLAN or the ATAR. One example is the Dixon family, who currently live in Bali but homeschool their children using the Australian curriculum through an online learning provider called UK for Future Learning. They continue to enrol their children in Australian assessments and comply with educational standards despite living overseas. If homeschooling were truly a rebellion, families would reject the system and ignore its rules. Instead, homeschoolers respect and work within the system's guidelines, showing cooperation rather than rebellion. Now to my second point, which is that homeschooling does not spread a message or inspire societal change. A rebellion challenges the status quo, demands change, or calls for new ideas. However, homeschooling is usually a private and individual decision made for personal reasons, such as family values, learning preferences, or health concerns. It is never aimed to protest, campaign, or cause large-scale change. According to the National Home Education Research Institute, homeschooling is chosen because it offers an educational environment that better suits their needs, not because they are actively trying to dismantle the traditional school system. ABC News states that homeschoolers participate in group activities with other homeschoolers but do not engage in public protests or efforts to change educational policy. Education expert Dr. Jane Smith has also stated that rebellion requires visibility, a shared cause, and a goal to change the system. Homeschooling is a personal choice that just doesn't meet these conditions. This clearly shows homeschooling is not a movement or a rebellion, but a quiet choice. So, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we, the negative team, firmly believe that homeschooling is not a quiet rebellion against traditional education because homeschoolers use the same system and it does not spread a message or inspire societal change. Let me leave you with an important message. Not every path away from the crowd is a protest. Sometimes it's just a better way forward. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Georgia Goody.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of our debate is that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against traditional education. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe that this statement is true. The first speaker on the negative team has argued that homeschooling complements traditional schooling, not opposes. This is false, as the US Census Bureau shows homeschooling households have doubled in 2020, mainly by the dissatisfaction with traditional schooling. That is not complementing, but rather a quiet rebellion against the schooling families do not trust. The first speaker on the negative team has also argued that the choice doesn't promote change. This is wrong, because even if parents don't choose homeschooling for political reasons or any other reasons, the act itself is still a resistance. The US Census Bureau shows homeschooling households have more than doubled in 2020, with every withdrawal being a silent resistance. Today, as second speaker, I'll be talking about distrust in the system's content and safety concerns. Our first speaker has already talked to you about cultural anatomy and silent resistance. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team case. Today, I will be discussing 2 points. Firstly, homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against traditional education due to distrust in educational institutions' content. The National Centre for Education Statistics found that over 80% of parents listed dissatisfaction with content as a reason for homeschooling. The Pew Research Centre found that parents often disagree with how schools educate on topics such as religion, morality, and cultural history. Similarly, the National Home Education Research Institution highlights that one of the top global motivators for homeschooling is that parents feel that schools undermine family values and cultural traditions. This choice isn't loud, it is a silent rebellion. Every time a family refuses to accept the school's curriculum and instead teach their values at home, they quietly rebel against the government-run schools. Furthermore, regardless if it is intentional or unintentional, homeschooling will always be an act of rebellion against what traditional schooling involves, not by shouting, but by walking away. Secondly, homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against traditional schooling due to safety of schools. Homeschooling often is thought to be a silent rebellion when traditional schools fail to foster a sense of safety. According to Australian Psychological Society, in Queensland, most of homeschooling reasons revolve around safety. One mother stating that her child was assaulted 13 times, leading to a silent removal from traditional schooling. This is where the concept of silent rebellion comes in. Parents may not be intentionally protesting, but the rapidly rising numbers say otherwise. The US Census Bureau reported that the share of homeschooling households jumped from 5.4% in 2020 to 11.1% a few months later, parents noting that they left traditional schools due to safety concerns. Similarly, ABC News Australia found homeschooling registrations to have tripled since 2013, with parents highlighting bullying as a main factor for their child's removal. These choices were not loud protests, but rather quiet withdrawals, with every child who pulled their child out intentionally or unintentionally rebelling against the traditional education system. To conclude, homeschooling is a silent rebellion against traditional education due to factors such as distrusting content of curriculum and safety reasons, which force parents to slightly pull their children out of the educational system. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Esther Zhu.
Good evening, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against traditional education. We, the negative team, strongly believe that this statement is false. The second affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that homeschooling is a rebellion against traditional education because of distrust and safety. This is wrong because challenging authority implies an intention to oppose or change the system. However, homeschooling families typically don't seem to change education laws or protest against, as many homeschool because of personal reasons, such as bullying, special needs, or lifestyle flexibility, not to send a message or overthrow the system. The second affirmative speaker has also tried to tell you that homeschooling is a rebellion because it rejects traditional education environment and teaching methods. This is wrong because choosing to learn at home is a personal choice, not a rejection of the system itself. In fact, most homeschooling families follow the same national or state curriculum and participate in standardized testing like NAPLAN or ATAR exams. They are cooperating with the educational framework, not rejecting it. Our first speaker has already stated how homeschoolers use the same system as the Australian curriculum and how it does not spread a message or inspire societal change. Today, as the second speaker, I'll be talking to you about how homeschooled children have health issues or personal preferences that need to be understood, and about how homeschooling is not a quiet rebellion against traditional education because it has been existent before traditional education was created. Our third speaker will rebut and sum our team's case. My first point is that homeschooling is not a quiet rebellion because many homeschooled children may have health issues or personal preferences that need to be understood. The main reasons as to why some children or teenagers are homeschooled is because traditional education can be overwhelming and does not suit their health needs or preferences that affect them. According to ABC News, an estimated 45,000 children were homeschooled in Australia last year. The Guardian also stated that Gemma Troughton, a teacher, put her faith in the mainstream system, but after seeking external help and receiving a diagnosis for her daughter of autism and anxiety, she felt it wasn't suited to neurodiverse children. This example shows just how traditional education may not suit everyone's needs and some may need to transfer to homeschooling. Now to my second point, that homeschooling is not a quiet rebellion against traditional education because it has been existent before traditional education was created. Homeschooling dates way back and for centuries has existed long before traditional education was formed. Before traditional education or homeschooling was made a legal education program, homeschooling was what children and parents relied on. For example, in countries such as Greece, Rome and early colonial America, these at-home education studies would be achieved through parents educating their children or even hiring private tutors during the Middle Ages. According to Britannica.com, modern public education systems only developed during industrialization, when governments sought to standardize learning for economic and social efficiency. This displays exactly just how homeschooling cannot be rebelling quietly whatsoever. Rather, it has existed before traditional education as a solution and daily routine as an educational network. So, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we, the negative team, believe that this statement is false. Homeschooling is not a quiet rebellion because many of the reasons homeschooling is used is because of health, needing more attention in class, and cheaper education. Homeschooling has also been a big piece in society from the beginning of education, existing before traditional schooling. With that, I'll leave you with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. There is no school equal to a decent home and no teacher equal to a virtuous parent. Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Sophia Chen.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of our debate is that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against the traditional education. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe that this statement is undeniably true. I will now rebut the negative team's case. The first speaker of the negative team has tried to tell you that homeschooling does not promote change. This is false, as rebellions can be unintentional, yet still voice a powerful meaning. Many historical figures did not intend to start a rebellion, but influenced many people. For example, according to Time magazine, Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani education activist, was invited at 11 years old to blog on the BBC about her life under the Taliban rule, to offer perspective, not promote activism. Yet, she made a powerful impact on women's education. Malala became a global symbol for girls' education. Similarly, homeschooling may not intend rebellion, but parents still influence others by withdrawing their children from traditional schools. The second speaker of the negative team has stated that every child has personal needs. While this may be true, homeschooling can still hold a strong influence on how parents perceive the traditional education system. As of 2025, social media is a powerful platform of communication and reshaping perspectives. According to Demand Sage, an average individual spends 2 to 3 hours daily on social media, with 50.1% of this time reserved for it. The APU found that social media wields cultural influence on fashion, food, health, local events and political action. In our ever-evolving world, choosing homeschooling not only shapes children's education, but also influences community norms, intended or not. The second speaker of the negative team has also stated that homeschooling has existed before traditional education. While this may be true, it must be understood that going against the default in the system is a rebellion in itself. As emphasised by our second speaker, the National Centre of Education Statistics found that over 80% of homeschooling parents projected dissatisfaction with school environment or content as a reason for homeschooling. When a family refuses to accept the school's curriculum and instead teach their values at home, they quietly rebel against the traditional system, regardless of whether it is intentional or not. I will now summarise my team's case. Our first speaker has already spoken about cultural autonomy and silent resistance. He emphasised that homeschooling provides families the freedom to alter education to fit their personal beliefs, and that by withdrawing, families promote a quiet rebellion. Our second speaker has already proved that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion due to distrust of the education institution and safety concerns. She spoke about how traditional schools often fail to foster a sense of security, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and how rebellions can be unintentional. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we, the Affirmative team, firmly believe that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against the education system. As scientist theorist James C. Scott once stated, most quiet resistance is never meant to be heard, but it still speaks volumes. Thank you.
Call upon the third negative speaker, Abigail Salter.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that homeschooling is a quiet rebellion against traditional education. We, the negative team, firmly believe that this statement is false. I would like to begin by rebutting some of the opposition's points. The first speaker has tried to tell you that homeschooling is a protest against the failures of the school system. Responding to a failure isn't the same as protest. If a parent withdraws a child from school due to bullying, poor mental health or lack of support, they're not making a political statement, they're making a personal one. Yes, the system has problems, but choosing homeschooling in response is more about protecting a child than challenging the institution. Rebellion requires intent to resist or disrupt. Most homeschoolers simply want peace, flexibility and safety. In fact, many families continue to support their local schools, vote for education policy improvements or re-enroll their children once their needs change. These are few children in special situations. The second speaker has tried to tell you that the increase in homeschooling reflects widespread rejection of traditional education. An increase in homeschooling doesn't necessarily indicate rejection. It reflects changing needs and increased access. More families are working from home, travelling or seeking alternative education due to neurodiversity, anxiety or illness. The rise in homeschooling is more about practical flexibility than ideological opposition. It's also worth noting that many families homeschool for just a few years, then return to traditional schools. Others blend the two, with part-time attendance, online schooling, or dual enrolment. This shows that families aren't rejecting schools, they're using them strategically. They have tried to tell you that homeschooling inspires others to leave traditional education, which makes it a quiet rebellion. Increased homeschooling numbers do not equal rebellion. The rise in homeschooling is mostly due to circumstances like COVID-19, health concerns, or parents' preferences for tailored learning, not because families want to fight the system. The third affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that rebellions are not intentional. This could not be further from the truth. A rebellion is defined as being actively opposing a system or rule with the goal of changing it. Therefore, this rebuttal is redundant. The third speaker has tried to tell you that homeschoolers use different curriculums. However, as emphasised by our first speaker, homeschoolers have to follow the same educational guidelines for them to be approved. Today, I'll be summarising our points. Our first speaker spoke to you about how homeschooling is not a quiet rebellion against traditional education because it still follows the same system as traditional schooling, requires the same curriculum, requires checks, and it doesn't propose a message or inspire any change whatsoever. Our second speaker spoke to you about how students may have health issues that are better accommodated to homeschooling and how it has been around since before traditional school was the norm. According to Britannica, traditional education has been around since the 19th century, long after there was homeschooling. Therefore, we cannot call homeschooling a quiet rebellion in any way. It is simply another option for education. Thank you.